In this video, we're going to review how to factor polynomials. Now I want to say that if this is your first time doing factoring, this video is really not going to be sufficient. Also, if you get through this video and at the end of it you're still not sure, you really need to do some extra work here. You can talk to me. I can maybe give you some link to more videos or more things, because factoring polynomials is one of the most important skills in algebra classes. I've oftentimes told my students that if you don't learn how to factor polynomials well, that it's going to be very difficult to actually pass the class. And it's just because factoring ends up coming up over and over again in many different chapters, and it will keep coming up over and over again in future classes. And the thing is that you don't even want to just be okay at factoring. You want to get really good at it, because there are going to be some problems in some sections where you might have to do, 6 or 8 different factoring in one problem. And if each one of those is taking you a couple of minutes, that's going to take forever to finish the problem. Whereas if you get good enough at this to where you can factor in, 20 seconds for basic ones, you will really save a lot of time and make it a lot better. Now, this is an overview of the factoring process. Basically, if you ever trying to factor something, step 1 better be to look for any common factors. If there are common factors and you can factor them out, it will make the rest of the problem easier. So always look for those first. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to see how many terms there are. If there are 2 terms, it's only one of 3 possibilities here. It's either what's called a difference of squares, a difference of cubes, or a sum of cubes. And you basically want to use these 3 formulas here. So let's go ahead and look at this. Then the next one is, if we have 3 terms, I call it easy X game or hard X game. I'll expand what I mean by that later. And if it's 4 terms, it's pretty much going to be factored by grouping. So looking at the first example here, we have x cubed plus 8. So we look, are there any common factors there? No, there's nothing in common between x cubed and 8. We ask ourselves how many terms? There's 2 terms. So either it's difference of squares, difference of cubes, or sum of cubes. It's not either of the difference ones because it's a plus sign there. Also, 8 is not a perfect square anyways, but 8 is a perfect cube, and x is a perfect cube, or x cubed is a perfect cube as well. So based on this formula right here, we would start with, x plus, and then it's whatever number you have to cube to get 8, and since 2 cubed is 8, it would be x plus 2, and then it's going to be x squared minus a is 2 times x plus 2 squared is 4, and that is the factoring. Now, if you don't know your sum of cubes formula, you pretty much are just stopped there. Now, I will tell you there's a little trick to help you remember it. So you write down your 2 numbers, right, that you get from the original problem. And then what was taught to me a long time ago is square, smile, square. So you square the first one, you get x squared. You smile them, you get 2x. You square the second one, you get 4. And then you also, don't forget, you have to have your SOAP. And this means same, opposite, always plus. So this right here is the same sign as what you started with. This one's always the opposite, and this one's always plus. So if that helps you remember it, great. If you memorize the formula, great. If you work it out without the formula, go for it. But knowing the formula can definitely save you time on those. The only good thing is that sum and difference of cubes doesn't actually come up that often, so it's not that big of a deal. But definitely something you should be able to handle if you see it. Now the next one, if you jump to straight saying sum or difference of cubes, you're going to have a problem because it's not. However, if you did do step 1 correctly and look at common factors, there's a 3x in common here. And once I factor the 3x out, I get x squared minus 25. And that is a difference of squares. So I get my x plus 5, x minus 5. Now, I will say some people like writing the x minus 5 first and the x plus 5 second, and it absolutely does not matter, right? We're multiplying things together, and when you multiply them, it doesn't matter which order you write them down in, so therefore it's fine. So it's up to you. As long as you get the right factors here, we're good to go. Now, for parts C and D here, those are both situations where there's no common factor, so we can skip step 1. And then step 2, we go for 3 terms, so it's either easy x game or hard x game. And how I know which one's which is I look at the front number in front of the x squared, and if there's a 1 there, that means it's going to be the easy x game. And if there's anything other than 1 there, that's going to be the hard x game. Now, there are lots of ways of factoring these polynomials. I've seen many over the years. Some I've done myself, some I've never seen before other than some students doing it. And I want to say that you do not have to do it my way. If you have another way that you know already and it works for you, go for it. I'm fine with that. Any mathematically valid way of doing it is perfectly good by me, but this is just the way that I like teaching it. So for the easy x game, you look at the constant term 6, you put that on top. You look at the middle term, negative 5, you put that on the bottom. Then you ask yourself, okay, what multiplies to 6 and adds to negative 5? That's a negative 2 and negative 3. And then you can go ahead right away and write down the answer as x minus 2, x minus 3. So the easy x game means you can go immediately to writing down the answer once you've solved the x game. Now, for the hard x game over here, when you draw your x, on top is not just the constant term, it's actually the first term multiplied by the last term, so it's going to be 4. And then you still put the middle on the bottom, and then you ask yourself, what numbers multiply to 4 and add the negative 5? Well, that would be negative 4 and negative 1. And here's how it's going to happen. You can't write down the answer right away. What you're going to do is you're going to do 2x squared, and you're going to break up this middle term. Instead of it being minus 5x, it's going to be minus 4x minus 1x, which comes from the two numbers you got in the x game. And then once you have it into 4 terms, we do our factor by grouping here. So we're going to break this down the middle. On the left side, I have a 2x in common with x minus 2. On the right side, I factor out minus 1 times x minus 2. And our final answer is x minus 2 times 2x minus 1. Now, as I said, there are lots of ways you might factor that. If you don't like my way, but you have your own way that works, great, go for it. I will say that the way that I originally learned this was I'd say, okay, the first term is 2x squared. So I write my 2 parentheses down. In order to get 2x squared, it has to be 2x times x. And then you start guessing things until it works. That's the way I was taught. That way can be faster than the way I did right here if you get good at it. But it also can be slower depending on the problem. So I'm just trying to really emphasize that there are lots of ways of doing this. And if you don't like the way I'm showing you, use a different way, and that's perfectly fine here. Continuing on though, if I look at part E there, no common terms, but there is 4 terms right away, so we know it has to be factored by grouping. We see there's an x squared in common on the left. We see there's a negative 9 in common on the right. We factor out the common x plus 5, leaving us with x squared minus 9. And I chose this problem in particular because a lot of students would get to this point, circle it, and move on. But you have to always ask yourself if there's more you can do. And there is here because x squared minus 9 is a difference of squares. So I can factor it in as x plus 3 times x minus 3. And then we're done. And then this last one is a little bit tricky here because we have x to the fourth, not x squared. However, if you look at it carefully, it looks pretty similar to one of the easy x games we have. And if I think about it, okay, what multiplies to 4 and adds -5? We already did that. It's -4 and -1. And why don't I try doing that? Well, I can, but instead of it being x minus 4, it's going to be x squared minus 4, and then x squared minus 1. And double check that if you multiply it out, it works. So this is kind of a special version of it. X to the fourth won't always factor nicely like this, but it did here. And then each one's a difference of squares. So we get x plus 2, x minus 2, x plus 1, and x minus 1. So you see, you don't always get what you expect when you're working these things out. But if you follow these steps, you can factor whatever polynomial we throw at you.